I've waited for this game since its announcement, and it took it time to be finally released on the only platform that matters. Literally a third-person shooter with a flying class. The meme of the Superman 64 is not a meme, it's how all of the games with person flight work when released on proprietary PCs called consoles in the dumb countries, despite literally containing the computing units, and not just being I/O. It's published by the forces of the Emperor Hirohito that hate all those
下の人々.
So it has no regional pricing. On top of the fact that all people who are against the war and are against the bald poo small nephrite rod have to overpay for the grey money transfers. The price is basically insane. I had to wait for at least some discount. If it's good, thank dog it is. It's worth the price. If it's not, the jokes would have been on me. I've already played Earth Defense Force, World Brothers, and overpaid for Custom Mech Wars, which I still haven't finished, so it's not like there isn't a track record for weaker games that are not worth such an insane price. And, well, I've also finished the EDF2, Dirty Gaijins call them Monster Attack and Global Defense Force, and Insect Armageddon, so I know for sure I'm not just a fanboy declaring every
地球防衛軍
an 11 out of 10 without playing. I ended up paying $3,600, which in real value comes to 51 sliced 400G white breads, or 21 kilograms of buckwheat, or 15.5 kilogram of jasmine rice. How many days can you survive on 21 kilograms of buckwheat? Besides having real full analog controls, you can also fix the PC version by yourself. The game is baked into 16:9 aspect with no .cfg or .ini in sight. If you use 4:3, 16:10 or UWS, it will not render the entire screen. Also, it has atrocious FoV in a game where you are being pelted from every side, where AI is tuned to always send a couple of enemies right behind you, and where you get buried and blinded by the number of bodies in seconds. After reading a post from Blaireau the 25th of July at 11:22 p.m. I refined the process. People usually go for the offset, but this game is still being updated so the offset changes. The first step is to download HXD from the original source. It will never hurt to scan it with Microsoft Defender just in case, better safe than sorry. After installing it, the next step is to locate the .dll file. In the Steam version you can press Gear on the Games card in the Library tab, Manage, Browse local files. Always make a backup, for multiple reasons. First, the aspect ratio fix. It will stretch the menus, but everything inside the game will look fine. The data is single float value, so you probably can just go Ctrl plus F, floating point number, float 32, 1.7 etc. Okay. This is the default value, and it probably should have the only result. 1.7 etc. is literally an approximation of 16 divided by 9, so you can calculate your aspect ratio into decimals and get the result to put there, on the right panel. I didn't want to experiment, so I just inserted my current plus the tail, 1.33 etc. Just in case if there will appear another result in the search, the decoded text near it should be similar to this. Different machines have different settings for character encoding, so the question marks can appear as something else, like Cyrillic symbols or hieroglyphics. Now for the FoV. Again, search, Ctrl, plus, F, for a single float value, float 32, 0.7 etc. This time there will be multiple results. The needed one is associated with the decoded text similar to. At lower aspect ratios the value has to be greater to compensate for the rendering technique. Is it overscan again? I've just added one instead of the first 0 and it was decently comfortable, without losing textures of the floor, like in EDF4 and EDF5 when I used someone's guides. When I tried to add 2 I got a big FoV, but more than half the textures didn't render. The game is 147 missions long, and on almost all of them the game run perfectly fine. But not on all of them. This game runs on spaghetti code, so FoV somehow changes Barga's controls. How come only one rare vehicle in the game decides to change its controls exactly orthogonally if you change FoV is beyond me. I've recently beat EDF 4.1 and EDF 5 again, and the FoV fix doesn't influence the controls in them, nor in the Iron Rain. Well, it doesn't take much time to accept and get used to Barga having its controls rotated 90 degrees. But here's the cherry. The bots do not run on scripts. The bots also press W, so all allied Bargas start walking left. In the Godzilla's fights it's not even noticeable, you just expect the bots to suck. And they still attack and kill the enemies. And here's the stem of the cherry. In missions 144 and 145 the scripts do not trigger until the bot bargas get to the designated points, and since they are not scripted, but press W, they just walk left in circles and the game gets stuck. For these missions you have to use your backup vanilla.dll, or verify the integrity of the game's files. You cannot replace the value back to what it was, the .dll must be entirely Mission 144 is not that hard, but Mission 145 is one of the hardest in the whole game, and you will have to play it basically blind, including Inferno, including the sucky classes on Inferno. This problem doesn't exist in modified EDF4. This problem doesn't exist in modified EDF5. This problem doesn't exist in modified EDF-IR. EDF6 is the outlier. For my first run I played the English version of the game. 4.1 has a very fun story, 5 has a very satisfying ending, but the story is rather dull, outside of just one line. So the beginning of the game took that line and decided to run with it, making that chunk of the game as fun as 4.1. Since that's a surprise plot point, nowhere in the marketing material you can see that EDF6 is recycling EDF5 maps. If you are not new to the series, you already know that the even-numbered entries are built upon the odd-numbered ones. And that the entire series is very iterative. While the underhood changes can be significant, a lot of this game still can be seen in the first entry. But this game goes beyond that. When you launch the game you see the new set of models, and you see the EDF5 maps, or at least very close approximations, being remade into a post-apocalypse. Cool, finally wing divers got some pants to wear. But after several missions, you are literally sent into EDF5 missions. EDF5 models, EDF5 guns, EDF5 menus, EDF5 music, EDF5 maps, EDF5 mission progression, with a slight twist. That part really does feel very cheap, and it goes for some time. People who peel off at that point end up being disappointed. But the game is 147 missions long. While that is mandatory semi-repetition, you can pretend you've got a 100 missions, actually way more, long EDF6, with bonus greatest hits of EDF5. And you still have all the changes to the guns and the gameplay. Unless you play as Air Raider, your fancy new way to play the game sometimes is taken away. Your perception of that twist depends on what you expect from a
地球防衛軍
game. I've played through 4.1 because the story was awesome, the writing of 5 didn't impress me, but I loved the progression and the finale. I've consumed IR entirely, finishing every achievement and beating every difficulty, including the last map of the last DLC on hardest possible, and grinding for all cosmetics, all guns, and boosting the PvP mode for hours. If you only play for the story, this story is very good. Not just for a game, but compared to any competing medium. It's built upon you time looping into EDF5, so that's why you have to play very familiar maps, and then replay them more with new twists. The game even toys with postmodernism, forcing the medium into the storytelling. But nothing criminal, just confusing for people who are forced to consult the internet, why they can't find the next mission. Also, one of the voiced character really sounds like Rick and Morty. Like, a lot.
Useless cowards, that's what you are. But beggars can't be choosers. We'll take what we can get. If you're useless, then we'll just have to make you useful. With some training, you should improve a bit. Starting now, we're gonna reform you ingrates thoroughly.
If you play just for content, like COD players play the same game, with the same gameplay, with the same story each time for 100th time, but are happy with it, as long as the content refreshed and all the models are created from scratch, then you will be disappointed. All EDF games are iterative. The even-numbered ones are built upon the odd-numbered ones. EDF5 is way more similar to EDF4, built on EDF3, than EDF3 is similar to EDF. The second game introduced flyers. The third one is made for a newer generation of hardware and doesn't look like a grey-brown turd. Everything was remodeled. There are a lot of new enemies. 4.1 reintroduced the flyer and created whole 2 new classes. And then EDF6 literally recycles a lot of EDF5 maps, and makes you play the same maps again and again, starting you from the same spot. If you play for the gameplay, there are a lot of iterative changes and changes to the balance in EDF6. Even when you play the same map starting from the same spot, you still play different missions, with different balance, with different enemies, with the new or changed weapons. Each mission has a different way to approach it and solve the problem. Fallout 2 and Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Am are considered to be some of the greatest games ever made. Meanwhile, few people ever talk about the originals. Yet those content packs have more or less fewer changes compared to the base games than EDF6 compared to EDF5. I've got into the gameplay, I like the story, and I finished the game. They did actually create whole 2 new sets of models for the main classes, and yes, you can give wing divers pants once you finish your first run. All the coel changes are very, very good. Even if some of them were obviously missing from the earlier games. Now MP and SP share the progression, so you don't have to replay the whole game with hard limits to see the MP exclusive missions. And you can easily switch between the two, without losing your story progression. The punishing balance is still there, though. The monsters scale with the number of players, and solo runs are still balanced for 4 players. Each monster bites 4 times as hard and has 4 times the HP. I am struggling to beat some of the 4.1 missions in MP solo, while I run this game in SP on hard from the start and never went normal. Playing with only 2 guys is the easiest. The game still doesn't count the difficulty above hard as cumulative. You've finished the cutscene map on Inferno? Now play it with 3 more classes, and then on hardest with all 4, and then on hard with all 4. The damage counter is awesome, and you can even choose any of 3 versions. On-screen damage numbers are just fun, but also it helps you to see the real numbers you do, to check if you are even doing anything, and to see how much HP the target has. The series has a lot of trash meme weapons in it, like grenades. And with 2 slots you either sacrifice a necessary long-range option, or a necessary close-range max DPS option. Hey, not anymore. Almost all of those are moved to a dedicated slot. You can have your sniper rifle, your close-range automatic gun, and your grenades, which also reload by themselves, without you having to hold them in your hand. With all of them being tightened up, and the amount and variety vastly increased, that's very good addition to your DPM. The normal grenades show trajectory and impact, the wind-up grenades made to have very flat trajectory at the beginning, and they are a very useful stopgap while you are reloading your main weapon. Claymores fly out all at once and can deal some serious damage. I actually was killing the final boss and its retinue with the long-winded grenades on hard. The rest of the guns are also tightened up, making them less useless overall. The one-shot sniper rifles are properly useful with their pierce damage and long range. Also, the bullet flies faster than some enemies can move their shield to intercept. Pierce damage, PT, was made more important, with how bodies block the damage even more. The weapons are moved around between the classes, so Ranger gets even more good things, while Air Raider has to slurp the leftovers. The game is built around aggro and management of small groups of enemies, so in single player the best damage dealing options of Air Raider often trigger the entire map, and he is much weaker at close range. With no co-op teammates to defend him, he is way harder to play as. He has the worst mobility of all, which on top of being bad in combat, means he is slower at picking up the HP and HP up boxes. The vehicles, as always, are outpaced by the difficulty and usually get destroyed before you even board one. Also with the point system you either waste points, or summon vehicles to just be destroyed. There are several missions which give you vehicles at scripted period and almost all of them were blown up before I could even touch them. Barga never teaches how to do the special attack. Somehow you have to start with a pose, before you can use it. AR in EDF5 is built around the usage of limp gun. All these airstrikes and vehicles are unavailable in caves and take too long to reload while you are being eaten by ants. Also airstrikes cannot hit anything taller than a big bush. EDF6 introduced drone warfare. You can have gun drones, suicide drones, emitter drones, strafing, sniping, bombing and mortaring drones. And all of them are usable in the caves. Drones are an awesome idea. You get whole 3 slots. The classic airstrikes are available in the EDF5 and in the good timelines. For the grenades you have several types of guard drones, medkits and buffs are moved to that slot. Decoys are kinda useless in general, but they are awesome against boss tier units. Just stick one to their forehead and see them lose their mind. But the version that AR got is bad. You have to deploy it under your legs and then... Sometimes they work, sometimes nothing happens. Limpet guns are all made to be much weaker. I was using them way more often than strikes in EDF5, but here their DPS is low and the reload times are too long. And here comes the nerf. All the turrets were given to Ranger. With limpet guns being not viable, you suck against flyers. Yes, the drones are awesome, but instead of reload, or limpy trigger, they work on return trip mechanics. So, if you miss a flying target, your tracer goes parabolically and falls somewhere out of bounds. So, your drone flies there, performs its routine, and flies back. All that time you are defenseless. The guard drones are basically useless against flyers, no matter which type you pick, and then they go into a long reload. I don't think there were major changes to Fencer, but I think it sucks more than ever. It has a lot of HP, but dies from one attack from one ant. Any other class, including Air Raider, just shrug off. Did they change some per pellet calculations? I don't remember such behavior in other games. One ant on hard with one acid piss removes 900 HP. And as always you have crappy DPM and extra long reloads. Fencer looks like a slow tank that should have extreme damage output. But that's a lie. Fencer is a very mobile unit, with the only viable setup, and that's why it has very low DPS. The shields exist to survive the enemy spam, since you can't shoot on the go, and has very low DPS. But not all maps give you a breather to reload your gun, and then you need your tank cannon to hit faraway up high targets. You basically lose 2 slots to dash and jump, 1 slot to shield and 1 to a sniper, when you need a close-range DPS option for your shield. It's Fencer, so instead of a high DPM tank you are mid-DPS mobile units, and to snipe you use sword. Fully charged sword has a range of 2500. Yep. It's a dash weapon, but it's not a good close-range option, though. Fencer and AR are not advanced classes here, they are hard mode classes. Without co-op support they suck in single player. For each one map where they can wipe everything faster than other classes, there are 30 maps where they are basically useless, and you have to come up with a new tricky strategy for each map to beat the game. And sometimes the trick is to farm easy Inferno maps with other classes, hoping that loot spill will give you a good weapon, and then grind easy maps to accumulate HP. Wing Diver is mostly the same. The grenade slot has a number of bonus DPS weapons. But the amount of magazine-fed guns is minimal, it's all charges. They really don't want you to destroy everything mid-flight like you could in 4.1. No laser chainsaw. With the amount of crap happening on screen, this 2-year-old game, built on 7-year-old tech, which already looked a generation or 2 behind, drops frames left and right. I'm still on 10900K 128 RAM 3080Ti, and then, of course, with a tolerable FoV, even more enemies, bullets, and destruction are rendered. EDF 4.1 has very aggressive LOD cull, but I never noticed it in 5 to 6. Maybe they should have left it. The vehicle controls are still dogshit. As a sane person you would think any game would use the perfect controls created 30 years ago, where W, A, S, D, or any analog, like a flight stick or a half pad or whatever you want to bind it to, will move the car relatively to its front, and your mouse, or whatever you use to control the camera, independently moves the camera. And, well, this game has literal tanks, where camera should just rotate the turret. Ahahaha, good luck. The vehicle controls are relative to the camera and randomly swap depending on the angle you are looking at. On top of that nightmare, most of the turrets are extremely slow, so with them your camera is too. You can't drive, and you can't see where you can't drive, at the same time. And of course, your tracks can get stuck in any tiny geometry on the level and/or you can sink. What can be easier than moving backwards with one button and shooting with your turret? But no, eat Superman 64 controls for vehicles. And of course there are choppers, with no analog controls, nor dedicated buttons, and they are extremely sluggish. The game still uses the dumbass RNG loot boxes, which you have to physically collect, so you leave one enemy alive and run around for 60 minutes. The rewards feel a bit tighter than before with less dupes and more spilling to other classes. The red boxes are still less than 1 HP, not even on Fencer. This is just taking a piss. For some reason they've added stupid white tint to the boxes, so now the red and green ones can look like the whites. I've paid an absolutely insane price for it. No digital game should cost more than a CD with TES3. It recycles a ton of content from the 5th game. Even when it doesn't, it's still just an incremental upgrade. And it is still a great game. I'm not a fanboy of the series, or the IP, or the subgenre. I didn't find a half of CB games to be good. It doesn't even make 4.1 or 5 obsolete. I still play those too. If you play for the gameplay, and not for content, it is a great game. The good story only adds to it. The balance, the mechanics, the weapons, it all is great when you can hexedit the FoV to be acceptable. Despite all the listed problems with it, it is a great game.